Hi, I'm Kirsten Pointer, and today I will be presenting my research on untreated ADHD in childhood and how early intervention plays a crucial role in preventing long-term consequences. This topic focuses on how ADHD is often misunderstood early on and how that misunderstanding can impact emotional development, long-term functioning, and just overall quality of life. First, why this matters. ADHD in children is often understood, especially when it's in its early stages. Many of the behaviors associated with ADHD, such as inattention, impulsivity, or hyperactivity, are frequently seen as intentional misbehavior rather than symptoms of a neurological condition. These behaviors are often judged without considering what happens cognitively, which can lead to responses that don't actually address the problem. Because of this, punishment is commonly used instead of support. From a behavioral perspective, this approach is ineffective because punishment doesn't address the underlying neurological causes of ADHD, it just reinforces it. And these early responses matter because they do not affect behavior in the moment. They shape emotional development, behavioral patterns, and how children begin to understand themselves over time. What is ADHD? ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects attention, impulse control, and activity levels. It is typically identified through three main categories of symptoms, which include inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. This can look like difficulty focusing, excessive movement, or acting without thinking through the consequences. However, what separates ADHD from typical childhood behavior is not just the presence of these symptoms, but their severity, consistency, and to the extent which they impact daily functioning across multiple environments, such as school, home, or even social settings. So while these behaviors may appear similar to what we see in many children, ADHD is rooted in neurological differences, not simply behavior choices. Research has also shown that these behaviors are linked to deficiencies in executive functioning, such as attention regulation and impulse control, which further supports that ADHD is not just simply a matter of choice or discipline. Now, the misunderstoodness of ADHD. Despite being widely recognized, ADHD is just frequently misunderstood, especially in children. Many of the behaviors we talked about, like impulsivity or difficulty focusing, are often interpreted as intentional misbehavior rather than symptoms of a neurological condition. Because of this, the response tends to be focused on discipline instead of understanding. Children are often punished for behaviors that they don't fully control. The problem with this approach is that it doesn't actually correct the behavior, but instead it reinforces frustration, emotional reaction, and negative behavioral patterns over time. The emotional impact. When ADHD is misunderstood and is constantly met with punishment rather than support, the impact goes farther than just behavior. It starts affecting the child emotionally. Many children with ADHD experience ongoing frustration because they are trying to meet expectations that feel harder for them to reach than their peers. Over time, this can lead to emotional dysregulation, where reactions like anger or irritability become more intense or harder to control. These repeated experiences also begin to affect how children see themselves. When they are constantly corrected or labeled as difficult, they start to develop low self-esteem and negative self-perceptions. Studies have shown that children with ADHD often develop distorted self-perceptions over time as a way to cope with the repeated negative feedback that they are getting, which can impact their confidence and development and emotional development later on in life. In addition to this, children with ADHD are at higher risk for anxiety and depression, especially when these challenges go unaddressed. Socially, they may also struggle with maintaining relationships, which can lead to peer rejection or isolation, further reinforcing the negative emotional experiences that they're having with their cognitive ability. About some of the long-term consequences. When ADHD is left untreated, the challenges that we see in childhood don't just simply disappear like people think. They often carry into adulthood in a more complex way. Long-term research has shown that individuals with untreated ADHD are more likely to experience job instability, relationship difficulties, and have higher rates of anxiety and depression compared to their peers. Many individuals with untreated ADHD experience difficulty maintaining stable employment due to the struggles with focus, organization, and time management. These challenges are often misunderstood as a lack of motivation from the employee rather than a continuation of earlier symptoms. Relationships can also be affected. Difficulties with communication, emotional regulation, and consistency can lead to misunderstandings or conflict, making it harder to maintain long-term connections. In addition to this, the emotional challenges we discussed earlier can develop into more serious mental health concerns, like we discussed with anxiety and depression. Even everyday functioning becomes a challenge with ongoing difficulties in managing routines, responsibilities, or just general organization of their personal home. Overall, untreated ADHD doesn't just stay in childhood like one would suggest, with it being a behavioral thing. It shapes long-term patterns that affect stability, relationships, and just overall quality of life. Why early intervention is important. While understanding ADHD can lead to long-term challenges, these outcomes are not inevitable. Early intervention plays a crucial role in changing the trajectory by giving children the tools they need to manage their symptoms effectively. Research supports this, showing that children who receive early behavioral interventions demonstrate improved emotional regulation and are less likely to develop severe long-term difficulties. One of the most important benefits is the development of self-regulation and coping skills. With the right support, children can learn how to manage attention, control impulses, and respond to frustrations in a more healthier way. Early intervention also improves academic performance by providing strategies that align with how these children learn and process information. In addition to this, it can also strengthen the relationship between the child and their caregivers. When parents understand ADHD, they are more likely to respond with support rather than punishment. Essentially, early intervention doesn't just reduce symptoms that these children have to deal with, it helps prevent many of the long-term challenges associated with untreated ADHD. The final takeaway: ADHD in childhood is honestly misunderstood so much. It leads to responses that can unintentionally create long-term challenges. When these behaviors are misinterpreted and met with punishment instead of support, it can affect emotional development, relationships, and overall functioning later on in life. However, early intervention has the ability to change this trajectory by providing children with the tools and support they will need to succeed. Ultimately, understanding ADHD and responding appropriately is essential in preventing long-term consequences and improving individuals' quality of life. And here are my references, and thank you for watching.